Remains of a 12-year-old girl killed in the 85 Philly bombing, found at a museum, even though law enforcement proclaimed boldly, all bodies have been accounted for. Let me remind you of that tragedy. Here it is.
Mike Africa Jr. lost his playmates, his home, and his innocence on this street 36 years ago.
It was Mother's Day, 1985.
The day Philadelphia police dropped a bomb on 3 blocks of this community. Home to a group of counterculture activists known as the MOVE organization.
I wasn't here that day. I was at my grandmother's house, which is about 4 miles from here.
You saw the smoke?
It was black, and you could see like ashes floating around.
The blocks were decimated, 61 homes destroyed, and 11 people killed, 5 of them children.
Put up the picture full mass. Human remains of a 12-year-old girl who was killed in a police bombing, Philadelphia, nearly 40 years ago, were discovered last week at the Penn Museum, where they were stored among thousands of artifacts being relocated to an upgraded storage facility at the University of Pennsylvania. Museum officials announced November 13th that they discovered the remains, stating that they promptly informed the child's family as soon as they were found. However, it was not clear whether the remains had been handed over yet to the surviving relative. There's more. Researchers identified the remains as those of a 12-year-old Delisha Africa, who was among those killed in the Osage Avenue police bombing in 1985, an event widely condemned as one of the most extreme acts of government violence in the history of Philadelphia, which remains a source of pain and anger for the survivors and their families. Last week's shocking discovery of the child's remains follows a 2021 announcement by city officials revealing that the remains of another bombing victim, a 14-year-old, Patricia Dotson, had also been uncovered at the museum. So what do you have here? You have the ingredients of a cover-up. Now, if their actions were justified as proclaimed during the bombing, why would they cover up the reality of these bodies, children at that, still being undiscovered? Because according to them, all were accounted for. There's more. Both sets of remains stemmed from that infamous bombing where police dropped an aerial explosive, like a military occupation, an aerial explosive on the headquarters of a Black group they considered radical, known as MOVE, killing 11 people, including 6 children, and devastating a largely Black neighborhood in West Philadelphia. MOVE's charismatic leader, John Africa, was among the killed. MOVE, founded in Philadelphia by John Africa in 1972, was a Black separatist group steeped in beliefs considered unconventional, whose members promoted a complete rejection of the modern society while advocating anti-government ideology. The movement emphasized a return to nature and environment and engaged in confrontational activism that frequently sparked conflict with neighbors and law enforcement, culminating in the bombing of the group's compound, May 13th, 1985. Another narrative would suggest that they wanted to live free of government control, connect back to nature and the environment. And if someone threatened that way of life, they were willing to defend themselves. There's more. Tensions between MOVE and the city had been brewing since 1978, when an eviction attempt at a previous residence on Pearl Street triggered a fierce gun battle that resulted in the death of a police officer. Later, investigation suggested that the officer may have actually been shot by another cop, shot by a fellow officer accidentally during the chaos, but multiple MOVE members were still sentenced to long prison terms, even though they did not commit the killing. One of those sentenced to prison after the group's 1978 clash with police was Consuela Dotson Africa, an outspoken longtime MOVE member and mother of Katricia Tree Africa, 14, and also Zanetta Netta Africa, 12, who were among those killed in the 1985 bombing, while Consuela was still serving a 16-year prison sentence. It sounds more like a mob hit now, does it not? There's more. 2 years after the 1978 shootout, the MOVE members moved into the ill-fated row house, where complaints quickly surfaced about the family living in poor conditions, with trash accumulating around the building, frequent clashes with neighbors, noisy political messages being broadcast through bullhorns at all times of the day. These concerns by neighbors led to a concerted effort to evict the group totally. In 1985, police obtained arrest warrants for 4 members of the organization, charging them with various offenses, including parole violations, contempt of court, illegal possession of firearms, and making terroristic threats, setting the stage for a violent standoff. Before taking action, police evacuated residents from the area, assuring they will be allowed to return to their homes after 24 hours. Now, I want you to understand context, okay? There are 4 people with arrest warrants. None of these arrest warrants are violent in nature. None of these arrest warrants are because someone committed burglary or somebody killed someone or somebody robbed somebody. These are not considered to be violent offenses. You have an alleged threat, terroristic threat. You have possible possession of a firearm unlawfully, and you have a contempt of court, typically not going to court on your designated court date, all right? Now, they decided to get arrest warrants for those 4 individuals. But in the process of that, they had approval to bomb by way of dropping a bomb on the community, everyone. I want you to think of this. As many times as other organizations that are absolutely terroristic in nature, like the KKK, they have engaged in this kind of extreme violence in the United States of America, where actual violence was committed against Black people. How many times has the police gotten approval to drop a bomb on the organization? Not once. Not one time. There's more. Hours before the blast, a day-long standoff occurred when police tried to raid the group's compound in an attempt to make the arrest. But the members refused to surrender, prompting the city's fire department to target the row house where water cannons, while police deployed tear gas. Remember, they know children are here. When those steps failed, the Pennsylvania Police Department, the Pennsylvania State Police Department flew over the site in a helicopter. You now have a multi-jurisdictional operation They flew over the site in a helicopter and dropped a military-grade bomb on everyone, causing a massive explosion that set fire to the house, and then it spread to over 60 homes in the community, all of which went up in flames as emergency responders were ordered, don't do a damn thing. There's more. The inferno reportedly sent temperatures inside the row house soaring to nearly 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. According to city reports, only 2 MOVE members survived. Ramona, Africa, and 13-year-old Birdie. Hundreds of residents were left homeless. After the blaze was put out, the medical examiner's office failed to immediately secure the scene, allowing emergency officials to bring in cranes to sift through the debris, resulting in the destruction of crucial evidence and further damage to the victims' remains. The remains were then transferred among various city pathologists, outside experts, anthropologists from the University of Pennsylvania, all of whom disagreed on their identification. A commission was then appointed to investigate, leading to a 1986 report that condemned the bombing as unconscionable. The probe revealed that city officials tried to justify the bombing by citing repeated public nuisance complaints from neighbors for minor issues like sanitation, vermin, disturbing the peace. This is all on record. However, the commission found these concerns were clearly insufficient to warrant such an extreme response, such as the decision to bomb occupied homes. Documents obtained by the commission revealed that following the armed confrontation with MOVE in 1978, which, by the way, the evidence showed that another cop shot the cop, not a MOVE member, the mayor and other city officials had labeled the group as a terrorist organization, which was believed to have influenced the 1985 bombing as a form of retribution for the death of one of their own. Because of this, the commission ultimately dismissed the sanitation and noise complaints as false pretext for police action. In 1990, the city reached a settlement in wrongful death lawsuits, awarding $2.5 million on behalf of the children killed in the bombing. Other survivors filed a lawsuit which awarded $1.5 million in damages to Ramona, Africa, and the relatives of 2 other victims in 1996. The remains of those killed in the bombing were initially believed to have been cremated and discarded or otherwise returned to family members years ago. However, the discovery of Dotson's remains in 2021 revealed that some remains had been retained for forensic purposes, leaving the families of survivors stunned. Now, 3 years later, the young Africa's remains turned up in the same collection of artifacts. So the university said it informed the Africa family of the findings, but did not provide any details. The remains from the 1985 bombing were delivered to the University of Pennsylvania so that forensic researchers could help identify victims whose remains were still in dispute. From there, the remains were placed under lock and key at the museum, a secret that was finally brought to light by the Philadelphia Inquirer, 2021. In 2022, an independent investigation revealed that the institution only held the remains of a single individual whose identity could not be established definitively. These investigators also stated that there was no reliable scientific or factual evidence to support the claim that the museum was holding the remains of Delisha, Africa, Now, after 2 years, the Penn Museum purportedly came upon Africa's remains last week during a careful inventory of cataloged artifacts. The girls' remains were situated alongside historic items dating back more than a century, including thousands of human remains from ongoing archaeological excavations. During the announcement, the museum did not explain exactly when the remains were discovered or how they have been overlooked for decades, despite the facility's expert in archaeology and anthropology. Additionally, the museum has not said how the remains came to be in its possession, which staff members were responsible for acquiring them. No details were provided on the condition of the remains or how they were confirmed to be consistent with the identity of Delisha Africa. It's because they tested the remains. It is because they likely knew for many years when the accusation came that those remains were there. It is because likely the scientists who were in charge engaged in the cover-up. Why? Because they didn't want to lose grant funding, or they did not want to lose their reputation in the scientific community. Whatever it may be, it's not worth what they did. Now, this is how you can find out the rest of the information. Sue them. Sue them, put them under oath. Those individuals who engage in this cover-up, in my opinion, they may lie, but those lab techs will not. Those custodians will not. Those who had to follow orders from those scientists in those universities will tell you the truth. File a lawsuit. All right, Sharon, thoughts here.
I am still so ashamed of my beloved Philadelphia. I do not mind dating myself. I was a small child watching this murder play out on my family's television in 1985. And let's just be clear here. There was a black mayor at the time, and the police commissioner, Sambor, ensnared him in this plot to bomb and kill the children. Nobody ever held accountable. The mayor took full responsibility. The chief resigned. The fire commissioner, who said, let the fire burn, resigned. There is no statute of limitations for murder. The city of Philadelphia bombed itself, its own citizens on that day, and they paid peanuts, and no one went to prison for murder. There is still time. They don't care. You named all the reasons why this happened, and you are so right. You and your crack team and all the research. The other reason is they don't care about these Black people when they were alive. Now that they're gone, studying their bones like they're some ancient artifacts. Disgusting. I am disgusted by my beloved Philadelphia.
Yeah. And you make such a great point about the reality of care, the lack thereof. And if we can prosecute individuals for making the bad call during war, how do we then give immunity for a domestic organization making a murderous call in this country? It should not be. We will stay on top of this.